Aloha and welcome to CM 161 Week 2. This is the video tutorial to accompany your assignment number 2, Introduction to True and False. So let's go ahead and get set up again. So if you're not familiar, we're going to go through that process. We are going to continue working in our Intro to Swift Playgrounds repository. And so I've got my file right here, my folder. We're going to open that up and we are going to continue writing our code in the Swift Playgrounds 1.playground file. So let's go ahead and double click on that. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my desktop here. And so what you want to do is you want to have your GitHub desktop open on one desktop, and then I have my playground open here, and then I have my GitHub repository open just so that I can make sure that my workflow is working. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to make a comment here, and we're going to go assignment number 2, Introduction to True and False. So we're going to learn something called Boolean variables. Boolean variables only have two values, that is true or false. A Boolean, or sometimes referred to as a bool, B-O-O-L, is a common data type that has a value of only true or false. You might be asking yourself, what is so important about true or false values? Well, when creating programs, it can be very important to check if the state of something in your program or application is true or false. Depending on the bool or Boolean value, you will have your app execute a particular task. So basically, if your program needs to make a decision, it can make that decision based on a true or false value. So how do we declare a Boolean variable in Swift? Well, we learned a little bit about creating variables in the first video. We know Boolean variables can only have a value of true or false. Pause the video right now and see if you can create a Boolean variable with the name appState. We're going to go ahead and create a Boolean variable together. So we go var app state equals false. So we've created a Boolean variable here. It's a variable because it says var in the front. It has a name, app state, and we set that Boolean variable to false. It's really important to note here that we don't wrap true or false in quotation marks because this is not a type string variable. It is a Boolean variable. So make sure you guys understand that part. And then let's just go ahead and print the variable. If you guys remember the print function, app state, and you can use autocomplete if you'd like to. All right, so we've printed out our variable. Good, that looks great. All right, in part 5, we are going to compare variables using the greater than or less than comparisons. So let's do a comment here. Comparing variables using greater than or less than. So what I want you guys to do is let's compare the value of two type int variables and evaluate the value by assigning it to a third variable. Pause the video here and figure out what you need to do. Great. Did you figure out that you have to declare 3 variables? 2 of those variables need to be assigned to integers. And we can go over the third variable assignment when we get there. So let's go ahead and break this problem down. So we need to create 2 variables of type int or integer. So var number 1 equals, let's set that to 5, and var number 2, and let's set that to 7. So I want to pause here for a second. We've created 2 variables and they are assigned to integers. Remember, these are not strings, these are integers. And one thing that I want you to pay attention to here is that notice how I typed out the variable name number 1. I'm using something called camel casing here. And camel casing is really, really important in terms of being able to read code really nicely. We use camel casing. So the first letter of the first word is always in lowercase. The first letter of the second word is always going to be in uppercase. And you're going to do that for every word that you see here. So every word within your variable name. So my third variable, notice it's 3 words. The first word always starts with a lowercase character, and then the other words following, the first letter is always an uppercase character. All right, so be sure that you start to practice camel casing in writing all your code. Okay, this is programming convention. Okay, so we just declared 2 variables of type int, and now we're ready to create that comparison variable. Okay, so we're going to create a variable. So let's write that. We're going to create a variable that holds the comparison of the 2 variables we just created. So let's call that var compare, and we're going to say number 1 is less than number 2. So is this true or false? Aha! So the var compare evaluates to true. Okay, now in order to make compare false, what changes do we need to make? Yep, you got it. All we have to do is change the way the comparison symbol faces. Okay, so now compare evaluates to false. So as we move forward in the course, we're going to be using Boolean variables to make our programs do something or make our applications do something. It might not make sense here because we're not applying this now to an application that we're building. But as we move through the course, we're going to be utilizing a lot of these foundational concepts that I'm teaching you. Let's review what we just learned about Boolean variables. Boolean variables only have 2 values, true or false. Boolean variables are important because it allows our programs to execute tasks based on whether something evaluates to true or false. We can also draw comparisons between variables, which evaluates to true and false. And we can do much more with Boolean variables. This is only a brief introduction. It is very instrumental in determining the control flow in our programs and applications. Okay, so one thing we want to do is, this is the end of assignment number 2. Now, in order for you to get get credit for this assignment, you need to make sure that you commit and push your assignment number 2 code up to your GitHub. Okay? So you can say completed assignment number 2 video. So, and then we can say introduction to true or false. Or you can say Boolean variables. So we're going to commit to master first, and then we're going to go ahead and sync. Okay. Now, just to be sure, we want to double check what's going on in the GitHub or the cloud. So we're going to go into my repository called Intro to Swift Playgrounds and completed assignment 2 video. So this is where I will open up, expand this folder, expand this directory, and I will check your code to make sure that you completed assignment number 2. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask me in class or send me an email. Otherwise, aloha and have a great week.